They say every city holds a different version of you, and Birmingham was one of mine, just not one I'd ever planned on revisiting. It had been years since I'd last driven through the city limits, let alone stayed a night. But life has a way of folding the past back onto the present when you least expect it. In the fall of 2021, I accepted a short-term guest lecturer gig at Jefferson State Community College, filling in for a colleague who had taken medical leave. The paycheck was modest, but enough to cover some student loan interest and give me a change of scenery from Lexington, Kentucky. When I texted Kyle Brighton to let him know I'd be in town, he responded with that same goofy energy he always had back in college. "You're crashing at my place, no debate. I'll even clean the futon." Kyle was the kind of friend who never drifted, no matter how far you moved. He stayed in Birmingham after graduation, launched a podcast with his cousin, and had a way of making the mundane seem oddly cinematic. We hadn't seen each other in years, but within 5 minutes of pulling into his driveway, it felt like we were 19 again. That week blurred into a mixture of lectures, late-night food runs, and watching old Tarantino movies with greasy takeout boxes between us. Most nights we found ourselves at the 24-hour Walmart down on Montclair Road. Not for anything important, just snacks, cheap socks, dumb stuff. It was like reclaiming that feeling of being young and invincible, wandering aisles while the rest of the city slept. We laughed at the time. It felt harmless, like the kind of week you forget by next month. But one Tuesday night made sure we never would. It was just after 11 p.m. when we pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The air had that crisp October bite, enough to remind you the season was changing, even if the South never really got winter. Kyle was ranting about someone stealing his laundry detergent brand the night before while I was half listening, sipping on cold coffee from a gas station stop. The store was mostly quiet inside. A security guard stood casually near the entrance, nodding without much interest. A couple of night shift employees restocked shelves with the kind of slow rhythm you only develop when the clock barely moves past midnight. The hum of the fluorescent lights above gave the place that familiar ghost town feel. Quiet, sterile, and just detached enough to make you feel like you were walking through someone else's memory. Kyle split off toward the food section, muttering about strawberry Pop-Tarts. I followed loosely, hands in my hoodie pockets, eyes casually scanning. That's when I noticed the first man, tall, lean, wearing a black puffy jacket despite the mild weather. He stood by the self-checkout, tapping his fingers against a pack of gum, but his eyes weren't on his purchase. They were locked on something or someone. Then I saw the second man across the store, pacing slowly near the pharmacy. Same build, same kind of jacket, same anxious energy. They weren't together, but they weren't apart either. Something was off, and I could feel it in the way they moved. Too rehearsed, too timed. I leaned toward Kyle when he circled back with snacks in hand. "You see those guys?" He gave a passing glance. "Yeah, meth energy. Let's bounce." But we didn't. Not yet. We joked about it as we turned down the frozen aisle. Kyle made a crack about undercover agents shopping for Hot Pockets. And I laughed, but it was hollow. The tension wasn't going away. That's when the first sound hit, a sharp echoing crack that sliced through the air like someone had just slammed a metal pipe against the floor. Then another. And that's when the screaming started. People often say time slows down in moments of crisis, but it doesn't. It just changes shape. The seconds felt thick, like I was wading through syrup, trying to push through the weight of confusion and instinct. Kyle grabbed my arm and yanked me down behind a pallet of bottled water near the back of the store. A display of stacked Danny cases became our only barrier between us and the chaos. Another crack, not a pipe, a gunshot. I peeked through the gaps between bottles just in time to see the taller guy, the one by self-checkout, rushing down the aisle with a handgun clutched in his right hand. His jacket flared open, revealing tattoos, a long scar across his collarbone, and an expression that was beyond rage. It was desperation, the kind that made you realize this wasn't about robbery. This was personal. A Walmart employee, barely old enough to rent a car, stood frozen near the front registers, hands outstretched. Don't shoot, man. Please, it's not worth it. 3 more shots followed. I couldn't see where they landed, but the screams got louder. Someone knocked over a display of canned soup, and the sound echoed like a drumline. Travis, Kyle hissed, we got to move. We army crawled toward the garden section. My palms burned against the linoleum. I saw a woman clutching her daughter in the toy aisle, shielding her with her own body. Another employee was sobbing behind the customer service desk. The intercom mid-announcement cut out. The world went silent except for the distant ringing in my ears and the sound of our sneakers squeaking along the floor. We reached the back just as another gunshot fired. Somehow the garden center doors worked. They opened with a sigh, and the cold night air slapped me in the face. We sprinted. No time to think, just ran. Outside, the world still looked normal. That was the strange part. Streetlights flickered. Cars passed on Montclair like nothing was happening. We crouched behind a stack of mulch bags near the loading zone, panting like animals. My heart was slamming against my chest like it was trying to escape. It took maybe 5 minutes for the police to arrive, maybe less. Blue and red lights lit up the night like a strobe. Officers rushed in through every entrance, weapons drawn. Shoppers stumbled out in groups, some crying, some just blank-eyed. A man in a blood-soaked hoodie limped toward the ambulance bay. A young woman screamed when she couldn't find her boyfriend. We stood by a squad car, giving our statements in slow, halting words. It didn't feel real. The detective nodded, asked questions we could barely answer. Who shot first? Did we see his face? Did we know the victim? Turned out it was a gang thing, some kind of personal beef. The victim, just a guy picking up groceries, wrong place, wrong time. No record, no connections, just bad luck. Kyle stared blankly at the police tape for what felt like hours. Neither of us said much. When the crowd thinned, we walked back to his car in silence. I flew back to Kentucky the next morning. I canceled a follow-up gig that had been offered to me for later that month. I told them it was a scheduling conflict, but really I just didn't want to be back in that city or any city for a while. Kyle stopped going to Walmart altogether. Said he switched to online orders. Couldn't walk past a row of fluorescent lights without hearing that pop again in his mind. As for me, something in me changed. I didn't tell many people what happened. Not out of shame, just I didn't want to relive it every time someone asked. But sometimes when I'm walking through a store late at night and someone reaches into their jacket too fast, my body locks up before my brain can process anything. I know it's irrational. I know lightning rarely strikes the same place twice. But the truth is, when violence finds you in a place you thought was safe, when it breaks that invisible barrier of the ordinary, you never see anything the same again. Now every aisle looks longer. Every stranger seems louder. Every door feels a little thinner than it did before. And when someone asks if I want to make a Walmart run after dark, my answer is always the same. Let's wait till morning. Before last March, I used to think late-night store runs were harmless, boring even. But that was before I realized how quietly danger can dress itself up in normalcy. When Lena called me that week asking if I could help her move into her new apartment in Hudson, Florida, I said yes without hesitation. We'd been roommates in college, 2 psychology majors who never quite grew out of our bad habits. Midnight fast food horror marathons, wandering grocery store aisles like they were haunted houses. I was between jobs then, doing freelance editing and trying to piece together what the next chapter of life looked like. Helping a friend unpack boxes felt like a nice distraction from all that uncertainty. Lena's new place was tucked between a gas station and a strip mall, the kind of cookie-cutter complex where every apartment looked the same and every hallway smelled faintly of new carpet and paint thinner. We'd been working all day tossing old pans, trying to find where the box-labeled towels had vanished to, and eating cold pizza on the floor. By the time it hit 11:30 p.m., we realized we didn't have essentials. No toilet paper, no food, not even a working light bulb in the bathroom. That's how the decision happened. It wasn't brave, it wasn't reckless, it was just routine. Walmart run? Lena asked, tossing her keys in the air. Let's make it quick, I said. I've got sleep to catch up on. The store sat along US 19, a glowing giant of a building that looked like it hadn't closed its eyes in a decade. The parking lot was half empty, washed in harsh yellow light, the kind that makes everything look a little too still. A minivan idled near the entrance, its headlights off. Something about the air felt strange, quiet in the wrong way, like the pause before a siren. Lena joked, "Why do Walmarts always feel like they survived the apocalypse after 10 p.m.? We both laughed, but something in me didn't. Inside the Walmart, the world felt muted. There was that low hum of refrigeration units and the occasional squeak of old cartwheels, but not much else. An older woman in flannel pajama pants browsed near the pharmacy, and a stock boy with a limp pushed a cart down a cleaning aisle without looking up. We grabbed paper towels first, then a pack of energy drinks, and Lena added some light bulbs to the mix. It was a normal trip filled with casual banter and bad jokes. We were halfway through the snack aisle when I noticed them. 3 men in hoodies, all dark clothes, no carts, just standing in the electronics section like they were waiting for a show to start. One of them had a hand buried in his pocket. Another had his hood up so tight I could barely see his face. At first it was just a chill. That instinct your brain registers before your mouth can form the words. They weren't browsing. They weren't comparing TVs or talking, they were just watching. Lena leaned in, voice low but steady. "Don't look now, but one of them is following us." My stomach knotted. I turned just enough to catch a glimpse of him. Tall, maybe early 30s, pretending to study a row of granola bars just a few feet behind us. Except he wasn't reading any labels. His eyes were fixed. We moved aisles. He moved too. Lena stopped, looked at me. "Nope. We're not doing this tonight." We made our way toward the checkout lanes, not running, but definitely walking with purpose now. As we moved, I realized the other 2 men had positioned themselves nearby again, this time near the coolers. I could feel their eyes on our backs, tracking our movement. I reached for my phone, but didn't unlock it, just held it. It made me feel like I had a plan. When we passed the frozen section, I noticed something that turned unease into full-blown alarm. Outside, near the emergency exit, a 4th man stood by the door, just standing there, phone to his ear. His stance was too still, his attention too focused. And when I looked back toward the others, I realized they were all moving in a pattern. Loose, spaced out, but coordinated. "They're not just being creepy," I said quietly. "They're working together." Lena didn't argue. We made a sharp turn down the nearest aisle, hoping to disappear behind the tall shelves of paper goods. That's when we saw him, a Walmart employee, maybe 19, a little wide-eyed with a walkie-talkie clipped to his vest. I didn't hesitate. "Hey," I said, stepping closer, trying to keep my voice even. "I think we're being followed. Can you walk us to the front?" He looked at me, then at Lena, then toward the back of the aisle. Without a word, he clicked something on his radio, nodded, and started walking. Following that employee felt like walking the edge of a storm. The air was too quiet. My breathing was shallow. Lena stayed close beside me, unusually quiet now, her hand tight on the shopping cart's handle. As we turned into the main aisle near checkout, I dared a glance over my shoulder. The 3 men had stopped walking. They weren't pretending anymore. 2 of them were by the soda displays, standing completely still. One of them, maybe the one who followed us, had a smirk on his face like he knew we'd figured it out too late. That expression stuck with me. It wasn't frustration or panic, it was confidence. A look that said this wasn't the first time, that they'd done this before. We scanned items without thinking, hands shaking as we tapped the touchscreen. A bag of ramen, toilet paper, light bulbs. None of it mattered anymore. We just needed to leave. The employee stood close, not saying much, but his presence was everything. It told them we weren't alone. When we got outside, the parking lot looked deceptively peaceful again. The same flickering lights, the same idling minivan near the entrance. But now every shadow felt threatening. Every parked car looked like it might start moving toward us. The employee walked us to Lena's car, waited until we were inside and gave a small wave before heading back in. We didn't speak until we were 3 blocks down US 19, headlights blazing down the empty road. "They were going to grab us," Lena finally said. "That was the plan." I didn't argue because I believed her. The next morning I couldn't shake it. I called the Walmart location, not 911, just the store, hoping maybe someone would confirm it was all in our heads. That we'd overreacted, that it had just been weird dudes standing too close. But the shift manager I spoke with didn't dismiss anything. "Those same guys have been spotted a couple of times this week," he said. "Never buying anything, just loitering near the exits." He paused for a moment, then added something that made my throat close. "You were the 3rd set of women they tailed this week." There it was, the confirmation. The worst kind. Lena stopped going out at night after that. She started ordering everything. Groceries, takeout, even toothpaste. I didn't blame her. As for me, I still shop in person, madame. But not after dark, not alone. I don't wear earbuds in stores anymore. I walk fast. I keep my keys between my fingers. And I always check behind me before turning a corner. Because sometimes you're not just running errands. Sometimes someone's running a plan. A few months later, I found myself in another store back in Gainesville. Middle of the afternoon, well lit, full of people. I caught a guy standing near the makeup aisle, hands in his pockets, just watching a woman browse. He wasn't doing anything, but something in his posture made me stop and wait. And sure enough, when she walked away, he followed. I stepped into the space between them, just far enough for him to notice, just long enough to break his pace. He turned, walked the other direction. Nothing happened. Nothing needed to. I don't tell this story for drama. I tell it because the world is changing. Because quiet danger often hides behind normal things. Aisles of cereal, freezers full of ice cream, glowing exit signs. And because sometimes paying attention is the only thing standing between you and a nightmare you'll never get to wake up from. That night at Walmart didn't end in headlines. No abduction, no arrests, just a narrow escape. But that's the thing about bad intentions. Sometimes they don't need to succeed to do permanent damage. Just the attempt is enough to leave you changed. Now I move through the world with open eyes because I've learned that not everyone in the aisle is shopping. Some people are hunting. Always trust your instincts. Safety doesn't come from where you are. It comes from what you notice and how quickly you act. Because sometimes survival is just one aisle away from disaster. Long road trips have a way of stripping your nerves bare. By the 3rd day, even music starts sounding like noise, and every convenience store bathroom becomes a minor battle. By the time Jules and I pulled off the highway and into the Walmart Supercenter on Highway 192, the sun had bowed out and the lot lay under the yellow wash of sodium lights. Long rows of painted lines and a dozen or so cars that made the place feel both empty and watched. We were stopping for the small things. Water, frozen fruit bars Jules swore by, and a cheap charger I swore I'd remember to buy weeks ago. Nothing fancy. Just a pit stop between Fort Myers and Jacksonville, a night that should have been forgettable. That's when I noticed the black Dodge Durango. It sat near the garden center, engine off, windows dark. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to a car in a public lot. A silence that leans heavy like someone holding a secret. Inside, 3 men sat motionless. All of them wore black ski masks. No logos, no jokes, just blank faces behind narrow eye slits. I nudged Jules. "See that?" She squinted, then forced a laugh. "Okay, either it's a prank or someone's making a TikTok." Nervous laughter. We both used it like armor. We walked inside anyway. The store hummed with the usual. Refrigeration units, kids arguing over cereal boxes, carts whispering on tile. Jules went to the frozen aisle. I drifted toward electronics to kill time. 15 minutes later, she came at me pale and fast. "We need to go," she mouthed. "Why?" I followed her eyes. There, near the deli, were 2 of the masked men walking down an aisle. They had no carts, no items, no place to be. One of them held a phone but wasn't even looking at the screen. They scanned the store like they were mapping exits, watching how people moved, how staff positioned themselves. It wasn't performance, it was surveillance. My stomach dropped. I found a cashier at self-checkout and whispered what we saw. She looked alarmed, picked up the store phone and called for a supervisor. A man named Ramy arrived, calm, hands steady, eyes taking everything in. I told him about the Durango and the masks. He didn't waste a second. Ramy moved with purpose. He grabbed an associate and headed for the back. Everyone respond to the garden center, the intercom crackled a moment later. Code red. The word felt like a line drawn under normal. The garden doors sealed with a magnetic buzz. Lights seemed to dim even if they didn't. Staff shifted from slow night boredom to a practiced urgency I hadn't realized was rehearsed. Ramy led Jules and me behind customer service, through a side door into a dim stockroom. Inside, 2 cashiers hugged themselves. One teenage employee had a bloody tissue pressed under his nose. The young guy kept asking in a shaky voice, "What's going on?" Ramy shut the door and told us they'd seen attempts to access emergency exits and that the masked people were coordinating positions. They hadn't drawn weapons, and at least no one saw any. But that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. You don't wait for proof when the setup looks that deliberate. Outside, in the parking lot, the Durango still sat like a sleeping animal. Ramy had already alerted local dispatch and pushed a corporate alert. We waited in the stockroom with a dozen other employees and customers, time stretched thin. Every footstep in the store made the blood rush in my ears. Minutes felt like long, thin blades. Then there was a bang somewhere near the loading docks. Metal against metal, measured 3 knocks. Not frantic, not clumsy. A message. We all froze. Ramy whispered we should stay put. Police arrived. Officers moved through aisles and bowed their heads toward the garden center. They checked the Durango and searched the perimeter. The masks? The vehicle's occupants were gone, vanished into the dark before anyone could form a description beyond 3 masked people. Ramy and the morning team later told us these kinds of setups were not unheard of. Groups casing stores to learn staff patterns, to find who is alone or where cameras have blind spots. Sometimes it was theft, sometimes worse. The unknown felt worst of all. Jules and I left shaken but unharmed. We drove on with headlights cutting the night, both of us silent for a long while. The rest of the trip felt colored. Each rest stop looked suspect, every parked minivan a possible trap. That moment in the Walmart didn't leave headlines. There were no arrests, no dramatic chase on the news. But it left a trace. The knowledge that people who plan this kind of thing don't need to act to hurt you. The fear they create by almost acting is enough to change how you move through the world. After that night, I stopped assuming public spaces were neutral. I stopped letting late runs feel casual. I started scanning parking lots, making mental maps of exits, and telling friends to walk with purpose. Jules started sleeping with her phone within reach and insisted we park under lights when we stopped. We never saw the Durango again. We never found out who those masked men were or what they might have intended. But sometimes the nearest thing to a headline is the silence that follows. The room full of people who decided in a single shared heartbeat that staying put was the safest option. I was 23 at the time, working the night shift as an associate at Walmart. The store would close for customers at 10 p.m., but we staff had to stay for another 4 or 5 hours, restocking shelves, breaking down pallets, assisting the cleaning crew. At night, Walmart turned into an entirely different place. The same space that felt crowded and noisy during the day became hollow after closing, an empty shell lit by fluorescent lights and filled with an uneasy silence. That night, something felt wrong. 11:45 p.m. The laugh. While walking through the almost empty store, I heard the sound of a little girl laughing, faint but crystal clear. I thought maybe someone from staff was playing a video on their phone. But when I checked the electronics and grocery aisles, no one was there. I asked the guard, "Hey, did you hear that?" He chuckled and said, "Man, this place makes noises at night." Sometimes it's the refrigeration units, sometimes the vents. I nodded, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. 12:30 a.m. Garden center lights. The garden center is usually shut down at night, all lights off. But suddenly the floodlights there turned on. We thought maybe the motion sensor had been triggered. 2 staff went to check, but the area was completely empty. The only thing there was a shopping cart, and inside it sat a doll. No one had put that doll there, and that particular doll wasn't even sold in that section of the store. 1:15 a.m. The freezer reflection. I was restocking the frozen section. The glass doors reflected my image clearly. But when I opened one of the doors, I saw another face reflected beside mine. A woman's face standing behind me. I spun around instantly, but no one was there. When I looked back at the glass, her face lingered for several seconds, pale, with empty, hollow eyes. The palette in my hands crashed to the floor. 2 a.m. CCTV footage. Manager Ramey decided to check the CCTV footage. At exactly 12:30 a.m., when the garden center lights had turned on, the cameras showed a small, shadowy figure running between the shelves. It looked like a little girl, no taller than waist height, but we all knew the store was secure. Every exit locked, the alarm system armed. There was no way a child could have gotten inside. Ramey just said, "Keep working. Everything will be fine by morning," but even in his voice I heard fear. 3 a.m., the last aisle. I was sent to the paper goods aisle alone. Suddenly I heard a whisper, "Help me." I raised my flashlight, and at the end of the aisle stood a small figure, a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, dressed in torn, faded clothes. Her face was pale, and her eyes were nothing but pitch black. I froze in place. Within a single second, she vanished around the corner, dissolving into thin air. 3:30 a.m. Evacuation. Then the fire alarm blared. Red strobe lights began flashing. We all rushed toward the emergency exits. But as I reached the glass door, I saw her again. The same little girl reflected in the glass, staring directly at me. By morning, technicians arrived and checked everything. They said the fire alarm had been activated by a manual pull, but no one had touched the lever. On the footage, there was only a faint shadow standing near the alarm, and then the lever simply dropped on its own. Aftermath: I quit the night shift after that. Later, I heard an old rumor about that Walmart. Back in 2004, a girl had died near the garden center in a car accident. Her mother had brought her shopping, but a truck struck them in the parking lot. The mother survived, but the girl died right there. Since then, people say her spirit roams the Walmart at night, wandering the aisles, sometimes asking the staff for help. I saw her face with my own eyes, and from that night on, Walmart has never been just a store to me. It's a place haunted by something that should never have been there. Back in 2019, I was working as a part-time security guard at a small-town Walmart in Arkansas. Day shifts were easy, but the night shifts, those were different. The store officially closed at 11 p.m., leaving only the cleaning crew and stockers inside. My job was simple: sit in the monitor room and keep an eye on the cameras. But one night at 1:40 a.m., something strange appeared on the screens. On the CCTV feed, I saw a downstairs service door opening and a man in a Walmart worker's uniform walking down the steps. The problem was, our Walmart didn't have a basement. At first, I thought it was some kind of system glitch. But when I zoomed in, the man's face was completely blurred, like he was walking through static on an old TV screen. Checking the floor, I grabbed my walkie and radioed Ramey, the night supervisor. "Hey, some basement door just opened. Did one of your guys head down there?" His reply was confused. "What basement?" "There's only the stockroom." I pressed him to come see for himself. When Ramey arrived and looked at the footage, all the color drained from his face. He muttered, "Forget it. The system must be lagging. Just ignore it." But his voice shook. He was scared to the whispering aisle around 2:10 a.m. The feed for the paper towels aisle flickered with static. When it cleared, a woman was standing there, long hair covering her face, dressed in something that looked like a white gown. 2 seconds later, the frame glitched again and she was gone. I grabbed my flashlight and headed straight there. The aisle was empty, but the air was unnaturally cold. Out of nowhere, a trolley slowly rolled forward on its own, wheels squeaking against the tile as if someone had just pushed it. The basement sounds. By 3 a.m., a new sound echoed through the store. Thud, thud, thud. It was muffled, like someone hammering metal pipes beneath us. The cleaning crew froze. One worker whispered, "Old buildings sometimes make noises like that." But this Walmart was barely 10 years old. The sound was coming from the exact area where I'd seen the basement door open. The vanishing man. I finally decided to check for myself. With my flashlight in hand, I went to the stockroom, and there it was. A gray metal door I had never seen before, with a sign that read, "Authorized access only." The door was cracked open. My beam of light revealed a metal stairwell descending into darkness, and standing halfway down the stairs was the man in the Walmart uniform, the same faceless, blurred figure from the cameras. He looked up at me and spoke in a voice that seemed to echo inside my skull. "Don't come downstairs, not yet." And then, he dissolved into thin air. The door slammed shut so violently that my flashlight slipped from my hand. Aftermath. When morning came, I showed the footage to management. They brushed it off, saying, "Sometimes cameras loop or glitch." Nothing to worry about, but when I went back to the stockroom, the gray door was gone. In its place was just plain concrete wall, as if it had never existed. 2 members of the cleaning crew quit that same week. I resigned shortly after. To this day, whenever I drive past that Walmart, I get chills, because I know what I saw. And I know there's something hidden beneath that building, a basement that shouldn't exist, waiting for nightfall to open again. I used to think working the late-night shift at Walmart was easy money. I was a floor associate, mostly in charge of keeping the self-checkout area clean and helping stragglers with price checks. The store closed to customers at 11 p.m., but we usually had 1 or 2 who slipped in right before closing and dragged their feet. That night it was different. 11:05 p.m., the man in aisle 17. As we were locking the front doors, I noticed a man standing completely still in aisle 17. Seasonal goods. He wasn't shopping, just standing. He wore an oversized hood, hands buried deep in his sweatshirt pocket. "Sir, we're closed," I called from across the floor. He didn't move. When I walked down the aisle, it was empty, no sign of him. 12:20 a.m., self-checkout screen. Around midnight, while the crew was restocking, I sat at the self-checkout monitor. One screen suddenly lit up by itself. It displayed, "Do you want to continue your purchase?" No one had scanned anything. The register wasn't even turned on for customers. When I checked the receipt log, it showed a single item. One child's coffin, $0. We didn't even sell coffins. 1 a.m., CCTV playback. I pulled up the security cameras. The seasonal aisle feed showed static, then cleared for 5 seconds. In that gap, I saw the same hooded man slowly walking toward the checkout lanes. His face was completely blurred, like the footage didn't want me to see it. When I rewound the footage, those 5 seconds were gone. Erased. 2:15 a.m. The child's voice. While stocking paper goods, I heard a small voice whisper, "Excuse me, sir. Can you help me find my mom?" I turned, expecting to see a lost kid. Instead, I found a shopping cart rolling slowly toward me on its own. Inside was a single Walmart plastic bag. When I picked it up, it was empty, except for a crumpled receipt. The item list said, "Child returned, no refund." 3 a.m. Closing up by 3 a.m., the crew was shaken. One janitor refused to mop aisle 17, saying he heard someone breathing behind him the entire time. Another stocker swore he saw a shadow crouching inside one of the empty carts. When I went back to the self-checkout monitors, every single screen was lit up with the same message. "Thank you for shopping. Please come again." and on each screen there was the blurred reflection of the hooded man. Aftermath. I quit the job 2 weeks later, but sometimes when I visit Walmart as a customer, I'll catch a glimpse in the corner of my eye. A hooded man standing at the end of an aisle, not moving, not blinking. And every time I check my receipt, I swear I see something at the bottom right under my groceries. One child's coffin, $0. When I worked night shift at Walmart back in 2018, one of my least favorite tasks was checking the fitting rooms in apparel. Even after the store closed, company policy said we had to walk through and make sure no one had left trash hangers or merchandise behind. One Thursday night around 12:45 a.m., I went to do the usual sweep. The hallway was quiet except for the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. Out of the 6 fitting room doors, one was shut tight. Door number 4. Normally they're propped open after closing, so I knocked. "Hello? We're closed. Anyone in there?" From behind the door, I heard the sound of fabric rustling. Someone moving. The locked door. I grabbed my keyring and tried the lock, but the key wouldn't even fit. The mechanism looked different, like it didn't belong to our store's doors at all. I asked over the walkie, "Hey, who's working apparel tonight? Did anyone leave door 4 locked?" Ramy, the supervisor, came back. "There is no door 4. Only 3 fitting rooms are usable right now. The 4th's been sealed since last year I froze." I was standing in front of door number 4. It was solid, painted beige like the others, with a silver lock that clearly wasn't supposed to be there. The woman inside. I bent down, looking through the crack under the door. For a moment I swore I saw bare feet standing there, toes pale against the floor. Then a woman's voice whispered through the wood, "Can you bring me another size?" I bolted. The footage. Later that night I checked the security cameras. At 12:44 a.m. the apparel hallway feed showed the 3 regular fitting rooms, and in the middle, a 4th door. It flickered on screen like bad VHS tape static. At 12:45 the footage showed me standing in front of it, knocking. Then for a single frame the door opened and a pale woman with long black hair leaned halfway out. Her face was blurred like the camera couldn't capture it. The next frame, the door was gone. Just 3 fitting rooms again. Aftermath. I didn't tell Ramy what I saw, only that I must have been tired. But I noticed something on my closing checklist that chilled me. Every fitting room was marked empty, except door 4. Next to it, in someone else's handwriting, it said, "Occupied, do not disturb."